This is the Etches collection, a new palaeontology museum in the Kimmerdige in Dorset. I saw about this in the TV, so I thought that okay, let's go and see it. It's new. This is the first week that Etches Museum is opened, and even in this first week, it has a lot of visitors. We just arrived 10 o'clock when the museum opens. It's now 11:05, and a lot of people already have been here from foreign countries even. That's interesting. So, and I saw Steve actually with such a love and care. He cleaned the floor tile. He saw a little patch on it. He cleans it. He has such a strong feeling for this place as his life achievement, you know. And he said to me that he had a lot of papers published and a lot more in the publication. And this is Steve.
I think basically the idea is they sort of really die on mass. Understand that's all dead on that sea floor, you know what I mean? And the bigger ones, probably the shells have rotted slightly and it's raining down on that. And then because they're in that, they tend to sort of liquefy and you find them, if you see it, you're that back, they stay out of that. The other side, actually rotted away, so I guess that's the way, you know what I mean? Just, and there's just fossilizing insects. I don't know exactly, but that's I'm going to do a talk in a minute.
Oh, there's a talk now.
Yeah, some points that you may or may not have noticed as you're looking through this, because we can't describe everything with just text. Okay, so there are additional sort of bits of information that we can't put on there. So if you want to come round and I'll show you some of the more interesting things, do so. If you don't, just carry on. All right. So if we start here, if you're very clever, and I expect some of you are, they've probably noticed that actually they've got the text wrong, because a femur is this bone here in your leg. Okay, and if you look at that arrow, it's pointing to the humerus of your arm. And that's wrong, but it's just that the person who did the graphics got it all wrong. So, all I can say is these are very large procodals. They're parts of the femur, parts of the humerus, the plesiosaurs and pliosaurs. Now, pliosaurs are exactly the same as a plesiosaur, and if you know a plesiosaur, it's like a Loch Ness monster with a long neck and a long tail. And the pliosaurs were the same family, but they had very short necks and very large skulls. And these things grew to about 20 odd meters, and they were the top of the food chain. So they ate anything and everything, all right? And we can demonstrate that when we go around the corner over there, okay? Because we find masses and masses and masses of predation. And even when you look at that limb bone there, you'll see it's quite well lit. You'll see some dents and holes in it, and they're puncture marks. Something's actually grabbed hold of it and ripped it apart, but it never ate that bit, because when these pliosaurs ate flesh, they also ate bone. They didn't chew their food, they just ripped it apart like crocodiles, swallowed it, and the digestive juices dissolved the bone as well, so they took anything and everything. Okay? We've wasted some space here, but I don't know if you know what coelacanths are. Does everyone know? Oh, good.
Yeah?
Yeah? Well, there's a lady, I forget the first name, but Latimer her name was, in the 1930s. She was, because everyone thought coelacanths were extinct, okay? And in the 1930s, there was a lady at a fish market in South Africa, saw this a coelacanth for sale. She thought, oh my God, this is this is the first one we've ever seen. So she had to get it back to the museum before, because in those days refrigeration was, no refrigeration. She got it back to the museum, and of course it hit the world press. Everyone wanted a coelacanth, and it nearly caused about their extinction then, because everyone was long-lining for coelacanths to put in their museum, But anyhow, they're a sort of fish that they thought was a transitional species, i.e. a fish that its limbs were developing like legs, or its fins were developing like legs or limbs, And it was like a fish that was actually about to crawl out of the sea and go on land to carry out its next stage of life. But it never did. And if you've ever seen the films on coelacanths, they go upside down and they use their sort of fins as limbs, but they've never come out of the sort of water, as one might say, and they're still living in two groups today. And this is we've just put the bones back, that's what I've got of it, of a really large coelacanth, okay? There's just a small skull of another one, okay? But they're quite rare in the fossil record here at Kimmerdige, okay? Because some of the fish you see here, the reason we got the money to actually build this is actually, we're lucky because it's staying in Dorset, most of the stuff is completely new to science. And when we went for funding for this, we approached the Natural History Museum and said, could we get a letter of backing for this collection to be housed here? And they came back, one of the guys, and said, we reckon you've got the best fish collection in the world, but the material that you've got in the collection supersedes ours by far. And that's the same now with the reptiles we've got, and the pterosaur material and everything else. So this is the reason the importance of the collection is actually gain this money, and it's staying here in Dorset where it should stay. You shouldn't have to go to London to see Dorset specimens. Okay? Yeah, carry on. Right. You may not look, but you're looking down the throat of the shark there. Okay? So if you look around the periphery, you'll see all the sort of teeth. And the interesting thing is on the left-hand side, you can see a funny little plate with like a barbed hook on it. And if you look down the side there's another bigger one. And they hang over the heads of the male sharks. They're there for a display or something, but they don't occur on the sort of females. Okay? So, and they're very rare in the fossil record because sharks, you may or may not know, their bodies are made of cartilage, and cartilage does not readily fossilise. Fish are made of bone. Bone preserves better than cartilage. Okay? So anything shark-like, we normally find lots and lots of teeth because they're made of ganoid, and we find the fin spine, but the body parts are really rare in the fossil record. So that's the first semi-3D skull of a hybrid shark we've got. Ichthyosaurs again, and if you go to Lyme Regis, if you really wanted to find an ichthyosaur, Lyme Regis would be the best place in Britain to find one. They're two a penny. I know that they're all that common, but anyhow, they're very common. A friend of mine collected 3 specimens in a year once. Okay, but in the Kimmerdige clay, they're really rare. We find lots and lots of individual bones of ichthyosaurs, but to find something like this is really rare. And this is and if you say it was in a white stone, actually it's still from the Kimmerdige clay. It's from a Cockless limestone band that if you go down the bay and walk for 2 miles, you'll see the Cockless limestone band in the Kimmerdige clay there. And so we found the front quarters of an ichthyosaur, but it's actually really interesting because again it's completely new to science. And you ask why, how do I know it's completely new to science? You look along its teeth, they're really small and sharp, okay? And when you study this, no linear lines up the tooth crown. So in other words, it's a specialist feeder, and it's unlike any other ichthyosaur we found up to date. It's also got a big eye, and of course, so you think, well, it must be feeding on something special because the teeth are not robust enough to feed on these big, heavily scaled fish. Okay, so we think that it's feeding on squid. Now, squid during the day go down deep, and they hide in the sort of darkness of there, and they come up at night to feed. Well, if you've got a big eye, you can actually dive down and still see. All right, so they can catch their prey down there where they're hiding. Okay, so this is a specialist feeder, and it's got some funny-looking cartilage along the tops of the ears. I'm not going to bore you too much.
Which bit of that did you find first?
Sorry?
Which bit of that did you see?
Do you want to know the story?
Yeah.
That middle, you can see the middle there, I've joined, and I found that about 3 or 4 years prior to finding that. Now, what you must realise is you don't see it like this. If you can imagine a block of limestone that high, okay, and you can see the cross section of those bones, you can see a line of bones, okay. So then you've got to thin the block down, which we do with a hammer and chisel. We don't use those fossil hammers that we use a big hammer and some big chisels, and and they're sharpened in a way like razor sharp. You actually go into the limestone, split it, and delaminate it. And anyhow, when I cleaned it, because you couldn't see all that, when I cleaned it, a friend said, well, find the rest of it, it must be there. I said, it's not there. I've looked. About 3 or 4 years later, I knelt down to look at them, and I could see another line of bones on another block. So when I split this big block, and it was so big that I had to use like levers. In other words, it was so heavy I couldn't lift the slabs I split off. So I had to use another chisel, lever it up, slice some pebbles in. Ideal kids, this is. And then you can just kick it off with your foot because it just rolls on the pebbles. And then split the next bit because you can only had to get down to the bottom of it. And then when I split it off, it came out in 2 blocks. You couldn't see any of this, by the way. It came out in 2 blocks. So it was so heavy, I separated it in my rucksack. It was a 100-litre rucksack with my jumper. And when I got back home, after I recovered, of course, because it takes a while, seriously, I'm not joking, you know, I opened the rucksack up and found, oh no, the jumper had gone, and so the other one of the slabs. And then I realised on the tip of the snag there was a block missing there, and I thought, oh no, in cross section you couldn't see the teeth, so it didn't look like a snag. So I had the day off the next day, because I work for myself, so that's all right. And I went back, the jumper had washed away, but right where I picked the rucksack up, that slab was there, so I thought, oh great. Then I had to go through about 300 or 400 weight of rubble to try and find the bit that was missing. And when I found that, I tipped it up, and I could see the tip of the snag. And I thought, oh my God, I've got it. So then it was a case of cleaning this thing, and it's beautifully preserved. You can see it's virtually uncrushed. Okay, the skull's crushed down, but if you look on side view, it's not crushed down dead flat like there's one over there. So it's really, really nice. And since then, because this fell out of the cliff, I found more of this. So I found part of the pelvis of it. So when we describe this new to science, all those features will be built into that description. So it's really, so it's all cutting edge science. This is, you know, fossils. You know, kids can find new stuff, completely new to science, and you can spend 10 lifetimes here collecting this stuff, and you'll find something new each time.
Oh, can I ask a question? So it's about sharks. Sharks are cartilaginous. They don't have very strong calcified bone, but they do have very strong calcified teeth.
Yes, they do.
Is this an evolutionary, something that evolved from an armoured plate or something
Right,
like
no.
that? How did that actually happen?
Well, the teeth are actually, they're not made of cartilage teeth, they're made of ganoid.
Yeah.
All right, and that's an enamel, okay? Which
So they're enamel, and
they're
have they
enamel.
got dentin?
It's like your
Have they
teeth.
dentin?
It's like your teeth.
Have they got dentin? A pattern of dentin as well?
No, not the sharks.
Okay.
No. Good lad. And you? Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I know that. Yeah, these aren't dinosaurs, but you're right. Hang on, you jump up and tell him. Come on.
And the pink one is squid, and the one is like some one and that.
Good lad. Well done. So, getting back to this. You see these goose barnacles, they get attached to like things that float across from America, and they actually just hang off a bit of floating debris, just still feed through the water. And they're called goose barnacles, they've got a big long fleshy pedicle. Now, they're known in the Jurassic, there's no doubt about that, but when I found the complete one here, I just thought I was the same as everyone else that's found, you know? So 25 years later, the long came professor and said, can I look at these barnacles? And he said, well, did you realise Charles Darwin's passion was barnacles? And that particular barnacle you've got is still living today off the seas of Japan. He said Darwin assumed he would find its ancestor back in the Jurassic. He said he never did, and you've got it. So you've got that missing link. But also, he said, he only found one, during his lifetime, he was an authority on barnacles, living and fossil. He found one new fossil barnacle. He said, you've got 5 from the Kimmerdige clay in your collection. And we've also got the world's oldest coloured barnacle, so you see a photograph of that. So that's quite interesting. Since then, I found a 2.8 metre long, covered with millions of them. Alright, so it's only a 2 metre long jaw. I can assure you they probably had a 4 metre skull. You know, they were big, they were huge. In the Natural History Museum, we've seen 2 sockets like that. And we've measured some of the teeth, they're 16 inches long. And that's including the root. And the reason they're 16 inches long in the sense they're all relative is actually they're anchored well into the jaws. So that gives them indication that they've got really fierce and powerful bite, and they can resist torsional stresses where your teeth will come out if you did too much, you know, the roots would just pull out. But these are so deeply embedded that they can actually just rip anything apart. They're very, very strong. Okay, so the flies. Yeah. Okay. So if we go to this, we're going on to the thing. Right, the age of the rocks here, good question, 157 to 152 million years old. And the thickness of the rocks here from that time is 530 metres thick. And as you walk east, the beds dip, so you walk through time. So we can actually collect from the whole series. Okay? And here, okay, so we've got eat or be eaten. So there's fish that predominantly feed on different things. So we've got fish like these were like tarpon. Okay, so in other words, they swam behind other fish and just suck them in. Not one with fish that big long in its stomach. Okay, these are quick knots. They've got these crushing teeth. They fed on like shellfish, they're like rats, they eat all sorts of things. There's another one here that's got 3 rows of teeth, and this is an undescribed dentary or lower jaw of fish, and that's rather like an anglerfish that sat on the seafloor. It just, with the 3 rows of teeth, it just closes your real powerful bite. But also, you've got to realise that some of these are completely new, so we've not yet been described.
That one there looks very similar to, was it the cat?
Yeah, similar, yeah.
Similar.
Yeah, very similar. No, there's nothing in the stomach.
Oh, right,
No, we're good. No, but we'll see some of those in a minute. Right, ammonite. Does everyone know what an ammonite is? What is it then?
It's a mollusk.
I thought that was coming. It's a squid. Like a squid. Squid in the shell. Yeah, it's not a snail, it's a squid in the shell. And it had a hyphename, it sucked water and it jetted itself along. So a squid in the shell is an excellent food source for something. And what we found, because this sea is about 200 metres deep, so anything that hits the sea floor is unaffected by currents or storms or anything like that. What I found was hundreds of these ammonites with big chunks missing. So when you put the ammonites together, you see the chunks are always in the same place, out. And it's the back of the body chamber. So the soft tissue in the squid is anchored to the back of the body chamber. Now, if you can actually break that attachment, you can take the whole tissue out. So somebody's perfected the techniques of doing that. And originally we thought it was fish, like these big pictodonts, but actually I don't think that's the case now. They're not clever enough to do that, I don't think. But what we've got are cuttlefish. And if you've ever seen cuttlefish octopus, they're really good and very skilled at getting over problems. All they do is grasp them with their tentacles, position them, they've got a parrot-like beak, break the shell open and take the fish out there. Alright? Okay, so that's the first predation you see on ammonite. Never seen it before. But the Kimmerdige clay being, like I said before, the least interesting in the British fossil collector, all of a sudden we're finding complete new information from this overlooked formation. Okay, so we've got, this is an ichthyosaur. You've seen it on the front cover of our brochure, but basically it's the most complete Kimmerdige ichthyosaur you'll see. Go to the Natural History Museum and say, can I see any of your Kimmerdige ichthyosaurs? They've got nothing, except for one splat specimen, which is not very good. But this one, if you notice anything about ichthyosaurs, it's got a really large head and a small body. The tail's missing, by the way. Okay. And that indicates it's a juvenile. And then if you look under the ribs, it's just full of food. It's full of fish, and it's full of squid. And the squid have got these funny hooks on the tentacles to hook their sort of prey, and they feed on small fish. And there's a bone there which is it's raised in relief, so it's a resistant compaction. Don't forget this is squashed down now. All the pressure of the overburden is just squash this down flat. And what we do when we find these animals is we turn them upside down in fact. Because when it goes down in the mud, before it gets covered up, it starts to decay. So the bit that sticks down in the mud is the best bit to prep. So we all turn it up the other way and prep it. That includes fish as well. So that's a really interesting one. You can see if you look closely, it's got blunt teeth, so it's feeding on quite hard scale prey. Not like that ichthyosaur we just seen over there with extremely sharp teeth. Okay? Now we get on to the mega predators now. So ichthyosaurs are an excellent food source for bigger animals. And what we found is evidence of predation. So if you look there, there's the lower jaw of an ichthyosaur like this. One half is missing, there's a big bite marks across the back of that. This slab here is the remains of about 16-foot ichthyosaur. And if you look at all the bones, they're all broken. And the clincher here is, if you look at the pattern, the bottom or the top third one down, there's a line across, and you see shards of bone all held there, where a tooth has actually just gone into the bone and sharded out flecks of bone off of the figure. But because it's still covered in cartilage and flesh, it remained. Bearing in mind we pressed this again from the underside. So we can't say with any authority what the predator was. It would either be a dinosaur or a crocodile. You see the big long roots, you can see black enamel crown. Okay? And so they deal very efficiently with anything like this. And think about, you know, being 18, 20, 16 foot ichthyosaurs, no problem at all. The interesting one is this one. Have you ever seen on YouTube there's me cutting this thing out? And when I found it, it looked like it was preserved upside down. So when I pressed it the other way up, it was preserved centrally, not. But if you look across the back of the bone, they're all broken. And there's shards of bone hanging there. Fish has just had its head bitten off. And that's just gone down on the seafloor. There was no more of it. Once you dug it out, you just get the whole skeleton. No, it's gone. And that was just the remains of it. Alright? Proof, that's, I'm not telling this. There's another component, that's part of the limb bone of a juvenile dinosaur. And you see it's got a line of 3 bite marks across there. And the linear lines on the tooth line actually press the those bite marks. And no surprise will be another limb bone there where a tooth line is a bit further through. And it is all over there with 2 teeth that actually crack the bone in half, so the 2 opposing teeth just crack in half. So we've got massive things. And this one, interestingly, it doesn't have to do with predation, but there's a new species of crocodile there. Does anyone know where its eyes were?
The swamp.
No, they're not. Actually, there are no slits there. Okay, but interesting, this one,